Welcome back, Albert here. Today will be an interesting discussion. Not only will I be talking about the 14th ruler of Númenor, Tar-Ancalimon, but also I will be discussing the division of the Númenorian people, the emergence of the Nazgul, and the establishment of two of the most important Númenorian havens of the Second Age. So sit back and relax, and let's begin. Ancalimon was born in the year 1986 of the Second Age, and was the son of Tar-Ancalimon. Ancalimon's name meant most bright, although one could also interpret it as great brightness, radiant, or brilliant. Like his father, Ancalimon grew up in an ever-changing Númenor. Traditions and beliefs had started to shift, and although this period in Númenorian history was considered a time of great wealth and prosperity, a shadow had started to form over his people. There is no information on his very early life, but I like to imagine he witnessed some very interesting things. The great Númenorian navy returning from Middle-earth laden with treasure on a regular basis. The ambassadors of Manwë, the Valar king, arriving and then questioning his father about his words against the Valar, witnessing his father arguing back his point with great conviction like no ruler before. It's hard to tell exactly when all this happened, but I like to imagine Ancalimon was there, sitting next to his father while he spoke. This, I feel, would have made a great impression on him. I would like to think Ancalimon had a great relationship with his father, because as you would have learned from my previous video, Tar-Ancalimon held on to the throne until his death. This of course broke Númenorian tradition, so one could assume he respected his father and his right to keep power. This can be debated of course, but this is the version I will stick with for now. When Tar-Ancalimon was finally laid to rest, Ancalimon would finally be granted the scepter of Númenor. He would be declared as Tar-Ancalimon. Now, in the time of his father and his grandfather, the Númenorians had begun to turn against the Valar and the Eldar, and take pride in their own strength and wealth. But unfortunately, this came at a price. The Númenorians became divided culturally and politically, breaking into two factions: the king's men, who followed Tar-Ancalimon's policies, and the faithful, who remained loyal to the Eldar and to the will of the Valar. Now, there is no exact date for this cultural break. However, it is said that the beginning of the movement on Númenor began during Tar-Ancalimon's time, and that the historians of Númenor officially recorded the division of the Númenorians during Tar-Ancalimon's time. However, the fact that Sauron was able to recruit 3 Númenorians as Nazgul before 2250 SA, as they first appeared in Middle-earth in 2251 SA, suggests that this process had already started externally in Middle-earth sometime between 1701 and 2250 SA. The rings of power gifted to these men, the Númenorians in question, allowed them to become mighty in their day, kings, sorcerers, and warriors of old. The effects of the ring caused their lives to be prolonged, perhaps living longer than most Númenorians of their family bloodline, while they lived, and to see things of the unseen. But over time, their bodily forms faded until they became wraiths, slaves under the domination of Sauron's One Ring. Now, I have to believe this evil would have made its way to the Isle of Númenor via the people who served under these Lords of Númenor, or perhaps they visited the Isle of Númenor themselves during the reign of Tar-Ancalimon's grandfather and father, before their darkened natures were visible for all to see, which would only have enhanced the ever-growing ranks of the king's men in the later years, and perhaps fueled the shadow and fear of death spreading throughout their people. This, of course, is only my theory, but it would make sense, since Sauron wanted his revenge on the Númenóreans in any way possible. Inserting his influence into their already swaying belief system would be the best first step. Now, as stated, the king's men sided with the will of Tar-Ancalimon. It's how they were given their name. This was the majority party in Númenor, and they were openly hostile to the Eldar and the Valar. Primarily, this party of Númenóreans had stopped speaking the Elvish languages, restricting even their children from learning it, and eventually had started to abandon many of the customs associated with the Eldar and the Valar. They envied the Eldar's immortality and despised the ban of the Valar, denouncing the idea that death was the gift of men, seeing it instead as unfair and evil. But because the shadow lay heavy upon their hearts, the king's men sought ways to delay death. Although it is said it may have ushered death towards them much quicker. They started to fill the land of Númenor with great tombs to preserve the memory of their dead, and in their everyday lives they became ever more decadent. To ease their fears, they drank and they feasted, and they clad themselves in silver and gold. The opposing party, the faithful, were the minority group, and lived mostly in the west of Númenor in the early days. The faithful insisted in keeping the old customs of their people. They had chosen to believe the words of the messengers of the Valar and trust that death, called the gift of men by the elves, was not evil. It was mostly in this choice that they differed from the king's men. The faithful also respected and loved the Valar still, and made no attempt to speak against the ban of the Valar. Nevertheless, they did not escape the affliction of their people regarding the fear of death that the shadow had brought upon all the Númenóreans, but they still kept their faith and trusted the Valar and J.r.r Ilúvatar. It wasn't long before these two opposing parties sought to claim their own piece of Middle-earth, a place where their form of thinking was accepted by all. The king's men took the first step, with their establishment of the new haven known as Umbar, a name already used by the natives of the land, and adopted by the Númenóreans who settled there. This eventually was converted into a great fortress in 2280 SA, as a reaction to the growing threat of Sauron, and thus it became the strongest and most important haven. Umbar was located south of the outflow of Andurin at the Bay of Bephalis, in a convenient, useful natural haven. Umbar was one of the trading ports of the southern coast of Middle-earth, which became a base from which Númenóreans' influence spread over Middle-earth. Like the king's men, the faithful also made settlements in Middle-earth, most notably Pelegir in 2350 SA, located above the mouths of Andurin, south of what would be known in future years as the Kingdom of Gondor. But unlike the king's men in those days, the faithful did not seek to subjugate the natives of the Great Lands. Because of the differences between the two factions, the faithful built Pelegir far away from the colonies of the king's men, which were a great distance to the south. The faithful also sailed northwards to Lindon to converse with Gil-galad and his people there, keeping their friendship with the elves and lending them aid against Sauron. Now you may be wondering what Tar-Ancalimon has been doing all this time. During this political strife, to make matters worse, Tar-Ancalimon had started to openly turn away from certain old traditions carried out by every ruler before him. Primarily, he discontinued the dedication to J.r.r Ilúvatar, which had taken place on the great mountain of Númenor, Mineltamar, in the middle of the island, a dedication known as the three prayers, religious ceremonies in which the Númenóreans worshipped Eru Ilúvatar, which took place in the spring, midsummer and autumn, which was blessed by the witnesses of Manwë, which were said to be three great eagles that flew over the mountain during each of the three prayers, and it was believed that their presence showed that the Eldar king approved of their deeds. Furthermore, the tradition of the taking of the king's name in Elvish he maintained, though partly through fear of ill fortune. But soon enough, this led to the departure of two great eagles that dwelt in an eyrie upon the summit of the tower of the king's palace in Armnelos, which had nested there since the beginning of the Númenórean kingdom. Their disappearance was seen as a bad omen, and truly reflected the feelings of the Valar towards Tar-Ancalimon's rule and beyond, and the shadow that had come across the Númenóreans of this time. Tar-Ancalimon died as he lived, clinging to the last breaths of life, as his father had before him, and when he was laid to rest in 2386 SA, he was immediately succeeded by his son Telemaite, who unfortunately, as you shall learn, followed in the ways of his father. Thus ended the life of Tar-Ancalimon. Well, if you are still with me, congratulations. I hope you enjoyed that. There are so many things I have left out, and to do justice to these elements, such as the two Númenórean havens, the Nazgul Númenórean connection, and the ceremony of the three prayers, I will be making specific videos for them. And trust me, you won't be disappointed at what I have to reveal. Personally, I can't help but feel disappointed. Ancalimon seemed to just pick up where his father left off, and his only redeeming quality is that he feared the Valar, and this is not something to respect. The Númenóreans, which I have come to know so well, are starting to change before my eyes, and it's funny, even though I know their future, I can't help but wish they will find a way to come back to the light and avoid their downfall. Perhaps I will make a video one day exploring that very option. Thanks once again for watching. If you like this, please subscribe, like and comment. And as always, may the light of J.r.r guide your way.